This episode contains mature themes and discussions involving death and grief that may not be suitable for all audiences. We believe in open and honest conversations, which sometimes means exploring topics that can be sensitive or challenging. Listener discretion is advised. My name is Shantell Martin, and I'm the host of What's the Point? This is a conversation series dedicated to exploring why artists create art and the forces that influence us. Join me as I sit down with artists and friends to talk about their reasons for doing what they do and why they continue to create. I'm so happy to introduce today's guest, Ruben Ochoa. Ruben is a Los Angeles-based multidisciplinary artist, and he is known for his sculptural work, installations, paintings, and photography. Often utilizing materials from industries and manufacturing, Ruben reveals the hold that these materials have over our everyday lives. He is exhibited globally, and I'm so glad to find out more about Ruben and his work today. Please welcome Ruben. Welcome, Ruben. I believe maybe this is my 8th or 9th.
Wow, that's awesome.
So not too many, but so we are in the Spotify Los Angeles downtown studios, and next door, I just picked you up from outside. And what was next door?
Oh, it's the USC Roski MFA studios for design and fine arts.
And you said you teach there?
Yeah, I teach. I'm a MFA mentor, so I usually do have studio visits there with a lot of the grad students there.
So what does it look like if you're an MFA mentor? What do you do?
Usually have weekly meetings with the students, go over their practice, go over their work, have about maybe 45-minute studio visit.
Yeah.
And every week it rotates.
And then you give them feedback or critique?
Feedback, critique, conversation, talk about their work, their practice, or current events, whatever they want to share, what they're working on, or if they just want to just have a dialogue about what's it mean to be an artist, or what's it mean not to be an artist, and just to be a person. Yeah.
So for you, what does it mean to be an artist?
What does it mean to me to be an artist? Oh, but by the way, thank you and hi. Shantell, I didn't get to say hi. I think it's just being a creative type. There's no really definition in the sense of like medium or material or genre. Just coming up with ideas, concepts, and actually trying to get what I really encourage my students is get their voice across. Get their everyone has a certain voice that they want to address, whether it's in design, whether it's in studio arts. You have this inner voice you want to express and discuss, and for me, it's usually about inequities, about labor, brown labor, the invisible labor, and for me, it's like, what does it mean to be an artist? It's like, I didn't grow up being an artist. My family didn't grow up. We grew up selling tortillas. My dad working construction. So being an artist is, it was something unfamiliar for the family. It's just a thing as a kid, you start drawing and you start gravitating towards it. And then you get that one teacher that encourages you to be an artist, to go to art school. And you're just like, how do I do this? And there's scholarships, there's financial aid. And then you just take a dive and do it, and you realize there's a lot of power in art. You could change. I really do believe art has the ability to change things, and I try to do that with my work practice.
So you said your family was selling tortillas, and then your dad was in construction.
Yes. Well, my mom was an amazing pioneer of everything when they immigrated here from Mexico. She was like, I'm not going to live on the ranch because my dad was working in the rancho in Oceanside. And so she got him a construction job to go work construction, but she pioneered selling tortillas. She would get them from LA and distribute them in North County of San Diego by foot, by door to door, then trunk of car, eventually a van. She was able to buy a van. Then she bought a fleet of vans, like 4 vans, and then eventually turned that into a brick and mortar and still sold tortillas and had the restaurant.
Is the restaurant still around today? Sadly, no. It's okay. We can take a minute.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
No, the restaurant, excuse me.
Just take a minute. It's okay.
I was on a good trajectory.
Yeah, just take a breath.
Good thing it's not being recorded. I think as you become a parent, you become more emotional. I realize, but no, I'm sorry. The restaurant's no longer around. My mom started it. She opened it up in 1984, and it lasted 40 years
Wow.
until a couple months ago.
And what was your first introduction as a child to art?
I think you're gonna bring the waterworks, Shantell. No, everything.
Yeah, it happens sometimes. It's happened to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's I just lost my mom a few months ago, so my earliest memory, and it's not. I just remember it's something I used to tell friends, and when I would do artist talks, getting out of undergrad and graduate school. My earliest memory was my mom teaching me how to draw a dog with no legs. Like she couldn't draw really well, but that was the one thing she encouraged me to draw, and I just kept drawing it. And then I ran into several. I was fortunate to have several elementary, school children. Several teachers throughout elementary, middle school, and high school to really encourage me to continue drawing and pursuing the arts.
Yeah.
But that is the first memory. Not that it wasn't something that just came up now. It's just something I always remembered. And lately, yeah, I think about it more. But
yeah, no, I love that. Kind of a dog, but it can maybe levitate or move itself around without the legs.
Exactly, like float around. And essentially that's how she was. She showed me how to navigate space and how to there was no boundary or barrier like that could hold us down. She would transpose herself from business, from location, and I think I took that to my practice and how to combine my family's vending experience to my art practice.
Yeah. And so before we get too far into that, let's just backtrack a little bit. And how do you pronounce your last name? So it's Ruben
Ochoa.
Ochoa. I'll say it again.
Ochoa.
Ruben Ochoa.
Yeah. So the number 8 in Spanish is ocho, and you just add an A, Ochoa.
Okay, so now I learned two things.
Yeah, Ochoa. You not separate, but Ochoa. So I used to sign my name with an 8A, but everyone caught on. Every other Ochoa out there was also doing it. So I was like, all right.
No, I love that. So it's like Ruben, almost like number 8 with an A at the end.
Yes.
There you go. So if you were teaching or mentoring MFA students, does that mean you have an MFA?
Oh, yes.
So tell us a little bit about your kind of education path.
I said Del Cerro was doing art in school, and that was one thing you just kind of, I was drawn to, and didn't know you could have a career, you could have there's a pathway for that. I just thought, I'm going to do art and eventually go to maybe community college or go to college and find something to do. But my high school art teacher really pulled me aside and told me right before I graduated, said, there's scholarships in this. You can pursue this. Because, all the colleges would come talk and do their presentation, come to this art school, and then it's going to cost, at that time it was like $20,000 or something, $20,000 a year. And you're like, there's no way I could afford this. But he pushed me to pursue scholarship. And so when I went, I actually was going into illustration, and I realized that first year in foundation that a lot of my artists that I was drawn to and the work I was already doing was about my community, was about my neighborhood, was about finding this voice and point out the inequities. Like when I would see gang violence, when I see, I grew up in North County, San Diego, so we would always have to come across the checkpoint in San Clemente. It's no longer as present anymore. They used to have you still see the Border Patrol there. But if you went to Tijuana or LA, which we have a family here in LA, you'd have to cross that checkpoint. And because you're Latino, you're you're Mexican American, you have that you fit that profile and they'll stop you and ask you, can I see your identification? Are you legal? And you're like, yeah, I was born here. And it wasn't enough. So that became part of my work and my practice, addressing those things. Especially here in the Southwest, used to be part of Mexico, but because of the diaspora and being close by the border, we're profiled a lot of Latino people of color. So that became part of my work. I would draw on that. My self-portraits for high school would be me getting hassled by La Migra, by the Border Patrol. And so I would do works like that. And I noticed a lot of my artists that I was drawn to was like the Tres Grandes, like Siqueiros, Rivera, Orozco, and Frida. And so I was like, oh, maybe I should pursue fine arts. I don't know how one makes a living in this. And my family didn't know either. But it was something I just dove into.
Yeah. And I'm a huge believer in creating your own opportunities by using what you have access to. And, it sounds like you were using the environment and the obstacles around you as a way to propel art or a way to understand it through art. And also, I understand that earlier in your career, you used your family's tortilla van to have a mobile gallery.
Yes.
And so also using something that you have access to utilize and express and explore art. Can you tell us a little bit about that, kind of drawing from your environment and, using the things that you have access to create art for others or to expose art for others?
Yeah, definitely. I think at the time I was doing work, I didn't know it was about identity politics. And I was making work that I was familiar with. I would draw things that were like comic book related that were popular in the late 80s, like when Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles came out or Garbage Pail Kids. Those are things I enjoyed drawing. But when I really looked at my own subjectivity and identity, I would draw about these experiences. And one thing is I realized tortilla itself could be a medium. We use it a lot for eating and cooking, and the masa, the dough, the tortilla is used for so many things.
So tell me about masa. So you're wearing a T-shirt that it looks like the NASA logo, but it says masa.
Yes,
with a corn through it. So what? I'm not familiar with masa.
Well, masa is the dough that you can make tamales, you can make tortillas. You could use it for so many materials. Like there's the joke of like what's in the Mexican food. You're like tortilla or corn, tortilla and meat and salsa. And then that can make chilaquiles, that can make enchiladas, that can make tamales, that can make tacos.
You're making me hungry.
Right, I know. When I start talking about my work, it's especially all the work I've been doing lately, we always get hungry. Like, what are we going to eat? Because it's food related. So, I started drawing. I actually started getting tortillas and letting it dry. And I started drawing on them and drawing them as a medium and gluing that onto paper. Drawing pen and ink on tortilla, portraits of my family. I found I didn't know how to explore fine arts, and my family wasn't familiar with it either. They knew I was going to art school. My mom was really encouraging. As long as I didn't get into trouble, get into gangs, or get into any hardcore drugs or anything, she was like, "You could do whatever you want. You support the family business when you're home, and then you could pretty much do anything else you like." And so that's how I was able to do art and pursue that. And as I was exploring it, I started involving them. I would take construction signs from my dad, or if I came across freeway signs, I would ask him to help me cut it out. When I needed to learn how to trowel cement, I would go to him. When I would need tortillas, I'd go to my family, and then my mom gave me the restaurant windows to just paint anything. I could paint every summer, any almost like glass mural, and a lot of it was it was food related. It was my mom's restaurant was Carlitos Chicken, so it was chicken related. And so I'd always draw, like for summertime, I'd draw chickens in bikinis or playing volleyball, chickens for flying and carrying the Santa Claus during Christmas. So it was always like chicken related, but she just let me do anything in that sense. And so that allowed me to really explore my practice in medium and painting. But eventually, when I got out of undergrad and I had the van, my family had several vans. They gave me one of the vans as a hand-me-down. It was on its last leg. It kept breaking down, and that's when I was going to eventually go to grad school. I took 4 years off. I was going to go to grad school, and I was like, well, I'm going to retrofit this into a mobile, artist space because I'm going to be on the road. I was staying between LA, Oceanside. I went to Irvine. I went to Otis undergrad for art school at Otis College of Art and Design here in downtown LA. And then I went to my MFA at UC Irvine in Irvine. So I was living in LA and also commuting back home to Oceanside.
So you did your undergrad at Otis, and then you went to UC Irvine.
Yes.
For your master's?
For a master's, yes. Mm-hmm. And I found myself driving, you're in Southern California, you're driving everywhere. So I would stay at my family's in Oceanside, which is about an hour plus from Irvine, as well as LA. So commuting. And so I started converting it to a mobile studio. And I was like, well, most studios have a gallery space. So I was like, I better put a gallery in it so I can show my work as I'm making my work. And then it eventually just became, I'm just going to make this into a mobile artist space and exhibit shows and not exhibit my work. I want to invite others. It was something like my family, like they'll sell tortillas and they'd have a route and go bring, it was essentially the Mexican market before those Mexican markets on every corner. It was a roving Mexican market. And I was like, well, I'm going to do that with the art. I'm always trying to transpose audiences. I'm always trying to have the art crowd see what work I'm doing in the community. I'm always trying to get the community to go to the art institutions. And I was like, I'm just going to do that with my van. And so then I ended up running a project that was called Class C, based off the driver's license. And
when was that?
That was from 2001 to 2005. And I ran like over 75 shows in the van. 75 artists, 13 shows, over 75 artists, curators, artists, collectives, artists curating shows, curators curating shows. And it ranged. It was from drawing, painting, sculpture, installation, video. And it wasn't little work. Some artists would do miniature work, but they would really get into the miniature, exploring the aesthetics of miniaturization, I guess. And others would do large-scale photos that would be, wrapped around the whole van, inside the van. Some artists would neglect. Eventually, by the fourth year, artists were like, "Oh, this is in the canon now. This is part of the system. I want to negate the white cube.
Yeah.
I want to destroy it or not be part of it." So then they'll tag on the outside of the van, or they would. One artist created a surrogate wall structure, and we towed it on the freeway, and he hung his paintings on the side of this trailer hitch. Another group of artists, they did a half pipe on top of the van, and they had someone skate it. And so it became, and another artist did a performance. Albert Lopez did a performance in Santa Ana where he pulled the van. That's incredible, like strongman, as him laboring over the art practice.
It's a beautiful concept. The van brings the art to the people,
right.
In many different forms. And what happened to that project or the van in the end?
Well, I eventually retired it because it was also the vehicle I would drive every day to work, and so I couldn't run shows every time. And artists wanted the van to do shows, and I was like, I gotta go to work. I also need this to drive. Plus, it kept breaking down. It was always breaking down. So my radius was I had AAA, and so I had the 100-mile towing range. So as long as I stayed within 100 miles, I could have shows anywhere because I know I could tow myself back home when it would break down. And so, and I've told people I want to do have the van run have shows across America, and ask for donations, but not for money, but for mileage, and ask people to donate their AAA mileage. But then it takes forever. Sometimes they're gotten a little better with technology. You could follow them, but before it could take an hour, 2 hours before they got to you. Yeah. And I was like, this is gonna take forever.
It still does, yeah.
Yeah, it still does. Yes. So I never did that, but I ended up retiring the van because it kept breaking down, and I needed to. I was also working on my practice too. I had whole body work I was doing, and people wanted just a van at some point,
And so you said, 75 artists, 13 shows. Were you able to document those?
Yes, I documented a lot of it. I documented all of it. This was early 2000s. This was from 2001 to 2005. So everything was moving from analog camera to digital. And so you got to go digital. But back then, digital was maybe 400K
Yeah.
kilobytes. So all these pictures we documented were like, you try to print them now, it's like, it's all pixelated.
Yeah, because I remember even, early 2000, a memory stick in your digital camera would be 2.5 megapixels.
Yes.
And so, each picture on there was very, very, very small in today's standards.
Yes, exactly. So, sometimes and if you still shot film, it was expensive. And I'm trying to run a project. I'm a student, so I couldn't shoot film all the time because it was expensive. So I got documentation. Not all of it's the best. It's not, whenever I could borrow a camera. And sometimes the shows would be like, hey, who's coming with the camera? We got to document this. But I do have documents of each show. I think every show, except the last one where I created installation where do you ever see VH1 pop-up video?
No.
They had these bubbles pop up of like all these like trivia facts. So I did that with the van. I did all these like little pop-up. It was actually before all the texting bubbles. I'd put all these like speech bubbles around the van, and it would be like, oh, this spot, a car crashed into it when we had Sandra De La Loza show in the van, but lucky the art wasn't damaged. This spot was the paint was peeled off because the bumper sticker show that peeled off. So it was like all these little like facts I had.
All these fun facts.
Yeah, fun facts.
And so it seems like, there's a theme of kind of, using the materials around you, the construction kind of signs, the vans, the tortillas.
Yes.
Painting or drawing on tortillas, what happened to those? Where do they go? Do people eat them? Are they displayed? That's such a material that, it's tactile, but it doesn't stick around long.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't edible because I would use pen and ink. And the one I think I found the other day, it was a portrait I did of my dad on tortilla. It eventually started to deteriorate because it's food. I didn't treat it or anything. Now, if I go back and do it, I'll probably try to treat the surface. But back then, I was like, I ended up just doing pen and ink and actually teaching workshops. So when I was at Otis, we had a class where we could go teach at a high school, and we had to come up with a course, like an art course. And so I had them all do tortilla. I looked at, had them look at Mayan art and pre-Columbian art, from where where the masa and the tortillas originated from. And so I had them look at that and do different pre-Columbian hieroglyphics on the tortilla. And then from there, I encouraged the students to create their own art, like their own graphics or their own designs.
Yeah. What's it feel like when you're drawing on a dried out tortilla? Is it the same texture as paper, or it feels very different?
It's it's harder. It's thicker. It's I actually would try to get them to do the quill pen and ink. But you could do marker or Sharpie. Mm-hmm. Some students gravitated to that more. I was just still trying to keep true to some of the art practice, like the art materials of like the quill, pen and ink style of stippling. But some students didn't like that because if they put too much, the ink will splatter. Mm-hmm. So they got Rapidio pens or they got Sharpies, and they actually like that much better.
So it seems like there's a huge practice of teaching, in your career. When did you first start teaching, and what have you learned about kind of teaching art to others?
When did I start? I mean, I took that course. I mean, as you're going to undergrad and graduate school, they're not like they're really gearing you to like after you graduate, you're gonna go get a job here. You're pretty much on your own trying to figure out how to survive, and everything you see is artists being teachers, and they're going to the education and to go teach others. Teach whether it's skills, concepts, lectures. I was always interested in teaching other students how to essentially find their voice and through the different medias and materials. So I did that at Otis. I did some workshops through some museums afterwards. They invited me to teach some workshops for junior high and high school. I don't think I was the best teacher back then, because at the same time I was still trying to make my work and figure out my practice and figure out where I stood in all this. I remember after I graduated, Irvine invited me to teach a few courses. A couple years later, teach there, and I taught for like a year or two, and I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed working with the students and really trying to push ideas. But at the same time, again, I was still trying to develop my practice. So my headspace wasn't all there. It wasn't until after getting museum shows, solo shows, and being in the Whitney biennial, and then also being in the collateral show for the Venice Biennale, and just having my career that I finally got to the point where I felt ready to teach. For me, it's always about impacting culture, and how do you do that? And teaching is one way to do that.
Yeah.
So I still make my work, and I'm so interested in. I found once I was able to get to that point where it's a matter of impacting culture, navigating students to see, hey, see, when I went to school, identity politics, a lot of artists were doing it, but it was being like poo-pooed. Like people weren't, the program wasn't, they didn't want you to do that. It's like, let's talk about form, let's talk about material, let's talk about form and space, the material, paint. And a lot of us want to talk about identity. And so now when I teach, I find myself bringing up all these artists, like artists of color that weren't around now, that weren't around then, or maybe that were shown but were marginalized. Now I could show them as reference and say, this is another way of looking at it. There's always been people making art, especially in communities. The art institution doesn't always look at that. It's like, oh, that's folk art or that's community art. That's not art, and that's not high-end art. That's like lowbrow art. But they've been making art before institutions, and it's just the institution, once it got canonized it, it's like, this is what art is, and this is what other is. This is like folk, and this is craft. It's like, no, this is actually art practice as well. This is materials.
Yeah, it's interesting people outside of making art get to say if it's art or not, or get to categorize it in that way.
Right.
So you mentioned some very incredible places that your work's been shown. Can you tell us a little bit about your practice for your art? I know you have already kind of in a past context, but for those who aren't familiar with, your practice right now, what does, Ruben the artist look like now? What does it look like? It's going to take some sip of water. It's all good. Yeah.
Yeah, you edit this out.
We can edit that out.
Sorry. What is Ruben?
So what does your art practice look like now for those who aren't familiar? If you could describe your work.
I mean, it's interdisciplinary. I went to school pursuing illustration and got a BFA in painting. I came out doing sculpture, large-scale sculpture. For my MFA, I did studio arts, and I just explored more. I explored, photography, sculpture, installation, and for a while, pretty much from 2005 to maybe like for a decade, people only recognize my body of work as the large-scale concrete works, rebar, cutting out museum floors, looking at the space as medium.
You cut out some museum floors?
Yeah, yes. For my first museum show at Site Santa Fe, my first solo show, I used the museum as they wanted the show to be site specific, and so I cut out the floor. The museum became my actual medium, and I cut it out and I raised it and elevated it as if the floor got up and walked out, or you stretched out the floor and all the rebar came out, And
they were obviously very supportive in you cutting out their floor.
They were. I mean, most of the budget went back to repairing the museum, unfortunately. It's all, every space it's a negotiation everywhere. It's a conversation and a negotiation. And I remember asking, "Oh, can I drill into the ground to anchor something?" And they were like, "Well, how many things you have to anchor?" And I was going to do this large scale installation where I want to anchor several rebar sculptures into the floor, and they're like, "Are we talking about one drilling one hole or drilling like 99 separate holes?" And I was like, "Wait, I could drill to 99?" And they're like, "Yeah, but it's a conversation." And I was like, "Well, how big can I cut it out?" And that's when they're like, "Well, if you want to cut the floor out, that's a whole other conversation." And I was like, "But I could do that?" And they're like, "Sure." And then I changed my whole proposal, and then that's when I went there and spent I think 8 weeks casing the joint and then cutting out the floor. And we ended up doing some really good stuff.
It's like the floor heist.
Yeah, yes. And I ended up bringing, again, what I noticed in my work was, for me trying to understand my practice was also, I guess my first audience was my family and like my mom and my family. if they understood it, then, for me, that was successful. And part of it was including them into the work. They became part of the work. They brought the tortillas, or they became the purchase from the tortillas. They became, I would incorporate them into the work. Like my brother became the vanguard for Class C. He was the avant-garde, like the gallery guard, and it would say vanguard on his shirt. And he was like, he was the most nicest guy. He wouldn't hurt anyone, but he was just stood there looking menacing. But he was the vanguard. And then my cousins who worked in rebar came, and they actually helped me learn the language of my dad showed me how to do concrete, because he told me to stay away from that so I could pursue school. But I went to art school and ended up learning how to mix concrete. And then I would include, he would show me how to trowel, and I'd get my cousins to show me how to bend rebar. And then I got a rebar bender, and I just started making my own sculptures, like drawing in space with them. And so I would incorporate a lot of the family. So they'd come to the shows and they'd recognize the materials, very familiar. When I would use wooden pallets, I'd get them from my uncle's pallet yard. I'd have the museums buy the pallet yards. I have the museum buy the pallets from my uncle. And my uncle, they're like swatches in a sense.
Yeah.
I'd set up certain installations at his pallet yard, and I'll be back next week. I'm going to rearrange it some more. I come back next week, he'll sell them all.
Yeah.
I'm like,
you're like, no, that's the art.
I'm like, yeah, stop selling my pallet. I'd go back another week, I set it up, and he'll sell them again. And I was like, you keep messing up my installation, because there'd be specific pallets.
Yeah.
And I finally just had to nail them together, so he couldn't sell them. At the end, he didn't touch a whole bunch of pallets. I had a big show at MCA San Diego, these large scale pallets that had like these concrete walls, like the floor and the walls melded together. And at the end, the museum's like, we can't do anything with these pallets. What do you want to do with them? Do you want to store them? I was like, I can't store pallets. I don't have that space. And they're like, should we give them back to your uncle? And I was like, sure. And my uncle was like, what? You guys bought them and you're giving them back? I don't got to refund you? He's like, when's your next show?
Yeah.
He would call me every time. Are you having another show with pallets?
Like, sign me up.
Yeah.
I love that kind of interference of dimensions of a space that we don't usually see as usable. Having your brother kind of be the guard, or taking out a hole from the floor, or, the family providing the tortillas. And,
right.
These are usually like untouched spaces where it's just facilitating the art versus is the art. And I've loved that you've kind of taken these moments and these intersections through a space that we mostly just ignore.
Right.
But we're surrounded by them all the time.
Yes. It is about looking and framing it, and or just seeing what's already existing. And I think for me, it was always like when I did a palette installation at MoCA here, and they had the education program bring a bunch of elementary school students to go see the work, and they would do drawings of works that they reflected on. I'd get a bunch from like students looking at the palettes, especially here in LA. They would different schools from inner city LA's would be like, my dad works at a pallet yard. I didn't know this could be art, and like it would actually touch them, and I was like, oh wow! Like I'd get these drawings of their renditions of palettes and my installation, and their personal stories of how their family would work, either in these informal economies, and how they struggle to make a living as well, and they're being seen.
Yeah, well, the art becomes accessible because it's familiar, and then if it's familiar, it's something that we can touch and perhaps play a part in as well. So, in a way, the art that you've created gives people permission.
Right. I hope so. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I try to look at it that way.
Yeah. And you've worked a lot with museums and institutions. For a lot of artists, those are kind of these big goals that they have, and that they seem for some people unobtainable to get to that level. For yourself, like, what was that journey like? Were you showing in galleries before? Were the museums and institutions coming to you? What did that path look like?
Yeah, they're going to school with a lot of classmates. That's kind of like your cohort, and you're like, we're going to change the world. We're gonna do this. We're going to come up together as a non-official collective, especially looking at other collectives that have been out there, Los Four, Osco here in LA, and seeing what they did and how they created space within their community here here in East LA, and being like, all right, this is what we're gonna do. This is how we're gonna add to that conversation. And then you go out there, and then all of a sudden the art market takes over, and then the art market makes it look like the piece of pie is really small, and so then it makes everyone not supportive of one another.
Yeah.
So for me, the van was that. It's like, how do I still keep up this support for other artists, for artists on the fringes, artists that are friends, artists that are marginalized, and the van did that. And I think that kind of brought attention to my practice. But essentially, at first, galleries didn't like it at first because, I became like a parasite to the art world. I would roll up with the van. We could park anywhere and have a show and open the doors, and there's a show. And the van itself is such a aesthetic. The van itself is like a beater, but because it was all tricked out, customized on the inside, I had an office. I have a storage space.
Wow.
I had the gallery. All done really well. Like I put in a lot of work into the full linoleum floors, the full brick wall in the back, and I have an office chair at blinds.
But in disguise, because the outside was very unassuming.
Yes, I left it as my family's van. It was like this beige beater, kind of still banged up, and but we'd roll up, and people would like gravitate to it. They'd leave the gallery to go see the work. But in the end, I think the gallery appreciated it because the galleries would appreciate it because they're like, oh, this is, for them, it was like spectacle. I wasn't doing it for the spectacle, but they were like, oh, you're bringing attention to our space. I was running the space as an artist space, not as a commercial gallery. And so since I was not taking away from their financial, from the economy of the gallery, they welcomed me. Institutions wanted me to become a piggyback or satellite of their space, and I just made it clear that initially at first they wanted to invite me and then curate into the van. I was like, no, this is my project. This is not a satellite of your space. You're inviting me to bring this project, and so I'll be selecting the artists, working with the artists. And so once they got over that I don't know, once they got over that they didn't control my project. They were okay, so they didn't invite me. Say, all right, featuring Class C and whatever artists I brought in, whatever programming I would bring in, they were okay with. So that kind of, I ended up creating all these relationships with a lot of curators, a lot of institutions. And then as I was doing my work on my own, like they see me doing my work, they were drawn to the practice I was doing. And so they would invite me to exhibit. And a lot of it was... I felt like the guinea pig in a lot of projects, a lot of spaces. It was always like the first in this nonprofit space, the first in this pilot program show. And I'd go and, all right, I got to rock this and figure it out and knock it out the park. You try. And so, I don't know. I mean, if anything, I always joke that my family, my mom, my dad, my parents, they taught me how to work and work hard.
Yeah.
And I wish they taught me how to vacation because then I'd rather take more time off and chill. So I'd get into a space and I'd just work my butt off and really try to make the work happen.
Yeah, it's super interesting that, this idea of the art market that you mentioned and then also like the art world, they are two different evolving kind of planets that orbit around each other. And
yes,
art is for all, because we all start off drawing and making and creating, and it's a gift that's given to all of us. And not that everyone should be an artist as their profession, but I am a strong believer in the world would be a better place if we continued to use that gift that we're given as children. But then we have a market that thrives on scarcity and facade and rules to make things that they approve have importance to justify the dollar amount on it. Right. And their kind of intention on many levels is to keep a lot of people out so that what they're doing is justified. And I think that's what makes the work that you've done really special, in the sense that you are doing it to a very high standard, to a high quality. It's very conceptual. It's at the same time, it's community, and it's building collectives, and it's given permission, and it's being open. And that example could be adopted by the institutions, but
right.
It isn't for many reasons. What are you thinking about or working on in now or in the near future?
what I've been doing actually for the last several years is kind of going back to supporting street vendors, especially during the Black Lives Matter uprising, during the pandemic, when the whole world went to a standstill, and everyone started to see all these inequities actually right in front of them, and people started to like finally call them out during that time. And monuments were being, like all these old monuments that didn't serve people of color were being taken down. LACMA and Snapchat invited me to do an AR monument. And one of the monuments, when they invited me to do this through an AR lens with Snapchat, I was like, how do I use this? How do I combine like I guess like selfie culture with advocacy? And one of the things that was happening during that time was a lot of street vendors were getting attacked and harassed and robbed, assaulted, and even killed. And so because I had this relationship and this affinity with vending and street vending.
But they were being attacked just in general?
They were being mugged and robbed because a lot of them were selling cash. You know, they're on the street selling, and it was the pandemic. People were people weren't working. They're losing their jobs. Not everyone. There were some that were essential workers and some that weren't working. So times were tough, and so they would go and mug street vendors that were out there trying to make a living. A lot of them are immigrants, so a lot of them weren't being reported, but through social media, it started getting documented, and it started being pointed out, started being called out on, and so I would see that, and so then when I was invited to address monuments, what would a new monument be? It could be a person, place, or thing, location, or an object. It was like the parameters. I said, well, I'm going to look at the social fabric of LA. What I consider LA is street vendors. Some of the first street vendors in LA recorded from like the 1800s were tamale vendors, or both Chinese vendors and Mexican vendors that would sell. I think the Chinese would sell the sonsu. It's almost like a tamale. It's like made of rice, and then the tamales would also be sold. So I ended up creating a whole Snapchat lens, like this 360 AR lens of like these kind of like this whimsical, magical realism experience of vendors. Like they'll have fruteros, like fruteros falling down, like floating down, the fruit cart, a palatero ice cream cart coming up, and then just popping up large scale ice creams, popsicles, like a towering flower bucket. And so that was part of it. If I just did the Snapchat lens, that would have been enough for LACMA and Snapchat. But for me, I was like, well, I got to really impact lives and really push this. And so then I ended up reaching out to several nonprofit organizations and grassroots organizations, Inclusive Action for the City and Community Power Collective, and asked, how can I support street vendors through this? They spoke to a lot of the vendors themselves because they weren't sure. They're like, who's this artist coming with Snapchat? And what does this mean? Because they get a lot of people that try to solicit them. Yeah. And they're skeptical, rightfully so. And I had to show my practice, show my work, and say, this is what I'm doing. And then the street vendors themselves were like, yeah, you also Snap. Like I use Snapchat, and they're like, okay, let's do this. And so I included them in part of the lens. At least they became part of the. It was LACMA by Snapchat, also community partners, which would be Inclusive Action and Community Power. And so from there, it became a whole campaign. We ended up doing the docuseries where we actually went and worked with Pete Galindo, LA City filmmaker, to actually capture the voices of street vendors. So it wasn't just my installation of this AR lens of the vendors through my eyes or through my lens. We actually hear the voices from the vendors. We also then, I went back to them, what else can I do? And they said, well, they need to know the rights, the rules, like it should be a tool. And so I convinced LACMA and Snapchat to make it a link to a website that LACMA hosts, where you have the docuseries, and then you got the rules, los reglas, los derechos, their rights in case they get harassed, either harassed by the authorities or harassed by people. They get to have their rights, and then also how to get their permits. And then I was like, what else? And they're like, well, they need money. A lot of them are immigrants. They don't have any financial support. They don't get any I already forgot the terminology during the pandemic. They don't get any of the
like
relief.
assistance. Or,
The relief fund that a lot of us were getting it. And so I was like, okay, we put up a link where they could donate. And then they said they had a ongoing street vendor fund, emergency street vendor fund, like $400 cash card, like a debit card. I said, perfect. Let's do this. I'll do this. I'll make a series of additions, and we'll donate 100% proceeds, and they'll go to the hands of vendors. It'll be a cash card. And so I did 2 series of additions. The first one sold out right away, which was awesome. $20,000 went to the hands of street vendors, and then the other $10,000 so far went to street vendors, and another portion went to vendors to go push for SB 972 to pass the recent law to support to make street vending. It was already legalized in 2018, but this would like hopefully remove all the loopholes that the cities were imposing. And so we did that, and that project itself ended up raising like $60,000. People donated money, which was awesome, without buying prints. And then the first tamale hot cart came out by Revolution Carts. They created the first LA County approved hot cart to support hot food, and tamales was the one that was approved. You could do corn now. You could do with the passing SB 972. You could sell corn, elotes, hot dogs, tacos, anything that's packaged. So
what's Revolution Carts?
Revolution Carts they're the fabricators. It's a partners. It's Richard Gomez, Patrick Lennon, and Matt Geller. They designed and engineered this cart. Richard designed this cart, and they're the partnership. And so they made this cart. And so Mexicali Biennial reached out to me to collaborate with them and wrap the cart. So I wrapped one cart based off an experience from Tamales del Primo in San Pedro, where they got harassed and attacked. So it becomes like a comic story of their whole experience. So since then, I've done 5 other carts. 5 of them by I've been wrapping and raising funds to donate them to vendors, and the 6th one was a commission, and that Tacos de Rey is using those carts to employ street vendors to sell out of them. So out of those carts, I've donated. I've been able to raise funds for 4 of the carts, and we're trying to raise 1 more cart for a vendor. I'm hoping for a vendor in South LA. We already did our interview process. So Mexicali Biennial raised the funds for the first cart. It went to Tamales del Primo. Freeze LA and Dobel Tequila raised the funds for a second cart, and I did a whole installation at Freeze LA had over 6 vendors there selling tamales and fruit. Mm-hmm. And then the Wingart Foundation and Miriam Muscola, she donated the funds for another cart, which we're going to be donating soon.
So how much does a cart cost?
The carts themselves, the funding for the carts for the art carts, I guess, are $15,000. It covers the fee for the cart, which is about half the price, and then it covers the wrapping for the cart, and then also for my design team to help me.
Yeah. And
then pretty much with that, we pretty much pay for all the getting the cart to get wrapped, delivered, and then also we help them with the permits. For them to get the permits, we work with them so they could get their permits. Oh, the Yarl Mon Foundation, the Yarl Family Trust, sorry. The Mon Family Trust, excuse me. Yarl's awesome. He came in at Freeze and saw it and said, how can I help? And I was like, we're raising cards. He's like, all right, sign me up for one. So for me, it was like getting my collector base to support the community collective. It was hard at first, but a lot of them got on board. It's all tax write-off. It goes through inclusive action for the city, and they do a tax write-off for those that donate. And I've been able to raise funds for 4 carts. The 4th one will be donated soon, and then we're raising for the 5th one.
Yeah, no, it's a really beautiful and interesting project. And, I love that common theme of the LACMA Snapchat project. Once again, just kind of like the floor in the museum, you were like, well, I can do this AR lens, but what are we not using that's already in this environment that can be a part of the work? And you went to the vendors.
Yes.
And then they became the work themselves, either lending their voice or, eventually those carts being wrapped and kind of being a vessel to carry your art around, but also, kind of being a home to the work that they create. Is there a way, or is there a place for people to see, the current cart project that you're doing online and also that past LACMA project?
Yeah. I mean, I post a lot of it through Instagram.
Yeah.
So through my Instagram, which is Ruben Ochoa, 3 R's, RRRUBEN Ochoa. And I'm not as diligent posting, but I do post a lot of the carts I've worked with, a lot of the vendors. And then you could go to Snapchat. If you have Snapchat, it's Vendedores Presente, the lens. And also LACMA would have it as part of their monumental perspectives. If you go to the website, you can see some of the video footage. So you don't have to have LACMA. You don't have to have, Snapchat. You can watch some of the video footage that they have on their website. And then Revolution Carts also has a few little video on their revolutioncarts.com. They do have a few videos of some of the projects I've worked on, the carts I've wrapped. And they've been working with other artists and working with other designers too, to raise funds. They recently just donated, like, I think, was it 30 carts through Taco Bell?
Wow.
So they've been able to get some big corporate sponsorship. For me, I'm doing it more one by one, getting my collector base to help support the carts that I'm wrapping and donating. Then I'm meeting with the vendors. I'm interviewing them.
Have you ever seen a cart kind of out in the wild?
Yeah. Well, we that's the other thing is we work with to find safe spaces for them to sell. And Revolution Carts works with Best Food Trucks, and they actually are able to have them set up at Home Depots, different Home Depots in Downey and in Lakewood. And so you could go to Home Depot on one of those days in Downey or Lakewood, and you see one of the carts they're selling, whether it's one of the carts I designed or another cart that another vendor has or another artist had designed. They're out there selling. And then I also work with them finding through my connections in the art world. I get them plugged into like the Hammer, LACMA, LA County Fair through LACMA, the Mexican Consulate through LACMA, Murmurs Gallery, ICALA. They've all been supportive in having a cart there. Carla magazine, they've been really amazing supportive when they have when they have usually when they have a launching for one of their issues, they invite one of the vendors to be there, and then they provide an honorarium for them, and if they don't sell enough, and so they'll have the cart there. And so I've been working on getting them to all these different spots, Murmurs Gallery, and they've all been supportive.
Yeah. So is there a directory somewhere where someone's like, hey, I'd love to have one of these carts at my event, like where can they find these vendors that you've been working with?
They could they could usually contact me, and then I'll put them in contact. I work with Best Food Trucks, Paloma. She usually helps organize a lot of the food trucks. So she does that.
I met Paloma because she was at the show I did at Subliminal Projects.
Oh, cool.
And very nice, very good, very tasty. Yep, I remember that.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So she'll usually organize, because we found ourselves different museums, and like I was doing Freeze, the other art fair. Trying to think, Murmurs Gallery, Carla, all these art spaces were inviting me to have a vendor there, and then each vendor has their own unique food, their own how much try to think of the terminology. Sorry. What their parameters are.
Like how much they need to sell,
etc. Yes, how much they need to sell, when they can do it. And so I'd call Richard, I'd call Patrick and Matt, and I'd be like, we find ourselves being event planners. And then Matt was like, no, we have Paloma that does this already for our food trucks. Let's get Paloma involved in this, because otherwise we're doing all this and we're asking what's the head count, what's the budget. If there's catering, it's always great if an institution or gallery wants to cater. That's pretty straightforward, because then they tell us how many people they want to cater for, and then we just tell the vendor, and they'll say, okay, for this amount of money, I could bring this much tamales or tacos or corn or fruit. But if they want them to sell, then we ask them for a minimum, because it's different for street vendors versus like a restaurant or a pop-up. The street vendors, they got to make the food beforehand. It has to be ready. It has to be in the cart. It has to be pre-made and packaged. So if they don't sell, if they don't make a certain minimum,
it's a loss.
It's a big loss. And they have their routes that they're doing. They have their locations that they're selling the cart. Now that they have a cart, they either go to like the Mazda Prima goes to different bars and Long Beaches, different events and Home Depots. But if I take them out of that and say, I had this art event for you and it's a loss, then then it doesn't serve them.
Yeah.
And I want them to make a living. So then we got to ask for a minimum, and so that at least it works out for everyone.
Yeah. So you've been working on some really incredible, projects inside the institutions, outside the institutions. If someone said to you, okay, Ruben, let's make your biggest goal or biggest project that you ever want to make happen. Like, what is that project? What would you want to build? What would you want to make? Because you've been using things that you have access to. There's carts on the street, there's your family van, there's construction materials. If you didn't have to use what you have access to and you could do anything, what would it be?
Right. It'd be my Jeff Koons version of. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
No. I think some of these elements that I do in the AR lens, I'd love to see them manifest as large scale sculptures or objects. Yeah. Like you asked where the van was. I was able to bring it out of retirement for its 20th anniversary, and I've always had this idea. Like I gave all these other artist shows. And I was like, I haven't really given myself a proper show in the van, and I always had this idea of casting, like filling the van with bronze tortillas, like because my family used to stack the tortillas. It'd be like almost like 900 tortillas. They stack them like bricks, and the weight of the van would go down. And I was like, I want to fill this van with tortillas, but bronze. Like one as a tribute to my family and to my mom for all they've done, and the other thing is like to one of the greatest inventions of the Americas is la tortilla. Next to the tamal and the masa, like the tortilla for here in the Americas. And so I was able to do a dozen of them. I'd love to produce more. So I brought that out in 2021, but it was a pandemic. No one saw it. It was an online show. So for Freeze LA, I brought that back out. And so people were able to see the van. The van, since then, it doesn't run. It's now transitioned to actual sculpture. You got to like ship it and tow it. And,
it needs to be towed, yeah.
Yeah, and AAA still works for that. Sorry. And plop it. But I think a lot of those elements that I do in my AR lens, it'd be nice to see large scale flower buckets. I want to work with the materials I know and just create large scale sculptures. I got hurt a couple years ago, so I haven't been able to work with my hands in building things for the last 2 years. So I've been anxious to get back once I get well, to get back in the studio and build things. Lately, I've been doing a lot of sketching and drawing, and so they're like all these unrealizable objects, I guess, large scale sculptures that I'd love to see produced. That also doesn't just go to a gallery or a museum, gets shown, but if it gets sold, then a portion of that goes to proceeds to support other charities or other nonprofits that support other people. Because for a while, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna make my art. When you finally got a gallery, you're like, all right, I'm gonna be able to make art, sell work, put some money in my pocket, still address these issues of inequity through my practice. Just being in the art world as an artist of color, especially in the early 2000s, already that was like a political statement, like having that ability to be in the space that's been very exclusive.
Yeah.
And to be there and to be now in museum catalogs, art catalogs, that was already, groundbreaking. So for me, I was like, all right, I want to get to the point where whether you love Andy Warhol or not, it's like the Warhol Foundation funds and supports not just individual grants, but also institution grants, like Creative Capital. Like I got a Creative Capital back in 2004 or 2005, sorry. And I was there, and there was like 40 of us funded. We were all funded by the Andy Warhol Foundation. Wow. And each one of us had the ability to get up to $50,000 if you push your project to that. That was like the cap. And I was like, this is 40 of us we could get up to 50K. That's based off one person's work that's no longer around, and through their prints and licensing. It's like, I'd love to get to that point where I could do that with my work and support other artists and support other people. It wasn't happening. I wasn't selling enough. I couldn't retire my family, or myself. Not that I'm at this point at age of retirement, but my goal is like, when I would hang out with Mark Bradford. He says, "Oh, I retired my mom." I was like, "What?" I was like, "I want to get to that point. I want to be able to."
Yeah, there's within your work, there's just a hugely altruistic kind of viewpoint and perspective. And, it's so nice to hear how supportive your mum was in your craft, and, what an inspiration she was, to the whole journey that you've been on. Yeah, take a moment. You're all good.
Thank you. I was flowing. It's grief, it's like a friend told me, it's non-linear, so it just comes and goes.
When it knocks on your door, you have to, welcome it in.
Yes. No, but I wanted to do that with my practice, and it wasn't happening. So the pandemic, when that happened, and the lens, I was like, this is what I want to do with the work. I made these additions. I went to my gallery who I was working with at the time and said, I'm going to do these additions. We're going to sell them. They're going to sell them to the gallery, and none of us are going to get any funding. It's all going to go to street vendors. It's not a lot of money. And the gallery is like, wait, what? We're not going to get any portion? I'm like, nope. And they're like, okay, let's do this. And then we'll donate as well. And I was like, awesome. This is what I want to hear. And so that's what we did. And so now when I do my work, I do want it to at least give back now instead of waiting around. It's not that I'm living it. It's not like I'm living it up. I'm struggling myself.
You got to make sure you pay your bills, Ruben, first.
Yes. I try. Yes, but yeah.
Because we want you to be around and be able to practice and work as long as you can, so that you can give back. So pay those studio bills.
I know, right? I in the balance of art auctions and auctioning off my storage. It's like, wait.
Yeah. Well, you have a very kind heart, and, you can see that throughout your practice. And I think there's not a lot of artists can look back over their work and see all the good that it's done to individuals, into communities, and then also just making people aware of some of the hardships it is to, be a vendor on the street and get a license, or even, be able to pay for a cart that is very expensive. And so on so many levels, you've been doing so many things, above and beyond. So, I'm sure lots of people are thankful for that. And, your mum would be extremely proud.
Oh, thank you.
And I'd love to, just kind of ask you to start to wrap up, what essentially do you think is the point of making art?
I said create change, to create change, whether it's and that could be, it could be defined by everyone could have their own definition of what kind of change they want, whether it's a visceral experience, how to look at the world, how to look at things. When I make sculpture and I encourage my students you make an object, you got to navigate around it. If your piece is, if there's like an underside and you get someone to crouch to look at that, even one person, then the piece is successful. It's succeeded. You got someone to actually move their body, and you activated the space. And it could be that simple, or it could be like cause direct impact, direct change, and impact people's lives. Whether the work you make, back then you're making work. You're just like, oh, I'm going to make art, and hopefully, someone buys it, and hopefully it could impact the world. So yeah, I guess I want to impact culture, and cause change. And if I could do that through the sales of works, I encourage students to chase the paper. But I'm like, all right, once you get that, what are you going to do with it? Are you just going to yes, treat yourself, but how else can you support others with that? And so be that change. And so yeah, I guess I didn't answer it one simple way, but
you did. To create impact, to create change, and allow people to move their body in a way.
Right. Yeah, and definitely impact culture.
And impact culture.
Yes.
Where can people find out more? You mentioned Instagram earlier, but can you just let us know where else people can find you and your work?
Google.
Yeah, just Google.
Well, I was working with the gallery. We just amicably parted ways, and so they do have some of their stuff. A lot of my shows are on their website still. But if you just do a search right now until I build my own website, I just have Instagram and trying to think. What yeah, for someone saying out
Okay.
loud in public. But yeah, usually Instagram right now, and until I build a webpage.
Yeah. And once more, just tell us your Instagram.
It's Ruben. I go by Ruben, but my mom would always say Ruben, so I always felt like I was in trouble. So it's RRRUBENOCHOA.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for coming in today. It's very special speaking with you and learning about what you've been working on, and also very inspiring to think about utilizing the dimensions that aren't obvious, and then also doing it in a way where you can give back and inspire and educate. So thank you so much, Ruben.
Wow, thank you, Shantell. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. Having seen your stuff, you're very amazing and awesome in what you're doing. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you too. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of What's the Point? Recorded at Spotify Studios in Los Angeles. Check out our website made by Eat.studio. Grant Alexander Peters does our theme music, engineering, and editing. Research and pre-show preparation are done by Vern Molidor and Joyce Adams-So from the Shantell Martin studio team. If you like this episode, please consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving a nice 5-star review. Don't forget to check out the show description for more information on today's guest. And you can follow myself and the podcast on Instagram at Shantell_Martin. What's the point? Running around the bend, running around the end, running around the bend, running around the end. Envelope sustain, envelope sustain, envelope sustain, envelope no pain, envelope sustain, envelope sustain, envelope no pain, envelope sustain. I sustain, you sustain, why sustain, you sustain, I sustain, you sustain. The pain is useless as we sustain. Packing up those envelopes, packing up those bags, packing up those envelopes, packing up those bags, tying up loose ends, tying up loose ends, tying up loose ends, tying up loose ends. Going around the bend, 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 sustain. Running through the field, 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 running through the field. I see, you see, we see. It's a turbulent sea, it's a turbulent place, it's a turbulent sea, it's a turbulent place, it's a turbulent sea. The sea of life, the sea of this life, the sea of your wife, this sea of the night of kings, the kings of queens, the queens of you and you of sea. Sea of mirrors, and mirrors of kind, and kinds of you, and kinds of me, and kinds of this, and kinds of that, and kinds of this, and kinds of that, and kinds of this, in times of that, in times of this, in times of that, in times of this, in times of that, in times of this, in times of that, in vats of this, in vats of that. I polar, you polar, we polar. Polar of the 6th place, polar of the 9th place, polar of the 10th place, polar of the iceberg.